In the annals of military history, few figures command as much respect and controversy as Robert Edward Lee, a man whose tactical brilliance earned him reverence from both allies and adversaries, yet whose allegiance to a cause defending slavery has forever complicated his legacy. Lee embodied the contradictions of his era, a gentleman who despised war yet excelled at it, a man who opposed secession yet became its greatest champion, a leader whose strategic genius prolonged a conflict that cost over 600,000 American lives. His story is one of extraordinary military acumen shadowed by profound moral complexity, a narrative that continues to challenge our understanding of heroism, duty, and the price of divided loyalty. Robert Edward Lee was born on January 19, 1807, at Stratford Hall Plantation in Westmoreland County, Virginia, into a family whose roots ran deep in American soil. His father, Henry "Light Horse Harry" Lee, had been a Revolutionary War hero and governor of Virginia, but by Robert's birth, the family fortune had crumbled under crushing debts and poor investments. When Robert was 6 years old, his father fled to the West Indies to escape creditors, leaving the family in genteel poverty. This abandonment would profoundly shape young Robert, instilling in him an almost obsessive devotion to duty and honor that would define his entire life. His mother, Anne Hill Carter Lee, descended from one of Virginia's most prestigious families, raised her children with strict adherence to Christian principles and Southern gentility, despite their reduced circumstances. The Lee family's financial struggles meant that Robert's path to prominence would require merit rather than inheritance. In 1825, he secured an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, where his disciplined upbringing served him well. Lee graduated second in his class in 1829, having accumulated not a single demerit in 4 years, a testament to his extraordinary self-discipline. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Corps of Engineers, considered the Army's most prestigious branch. His early military service took him to various engineering projects across the young nation, from improving harbors in Georgia to surveying the boundary between Ohio and Michigan. These formative years taught Lee the importance of meticulous planning and attention to detail that would later distinguish his military campaigns. In 1831, Lee married Mary Anna Custis Lee, great-granddaughter of Martha Washington, in a union that elevated his social standing and connected him more deeply to Virginia's aristocratic heritage. Their marriage produced 7 children and was marked by deep affection, despite Lee's frequent military absences. Mary inherited Arlington House, the magnificent mansion overlooking the Potomac River, which became the Lee family's beloved home. Lee's personal character was defined by unwavering courtesy, deep religious faith, and an almost pathological sense of duty. He was known for his kindness to subordinates, his patience with difficult situations, and his ability to inspire fierce loyalty among those who served under him. Yet he also possessed an iron will and could be ruthlessly demanding when military necessity required it. Lee's first taste of combat came during the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848, where he served on the staff of General Winfield Scott. His reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines and tactical advice proved invaluable during the campaign that captured Mexico City. At the Battle of Cerro Gordo, Lee discovered a path that allowed American forces to outflank the Mexican position, earning him recognition and promotion to major. The war taught Lee crucial lessons about logistics, reconnaissance, and the importance of mobility in warfare. He also formed relationships with many officers who would later become his adversaries, including Ulysses S. Grant and George McClellan. The Mexican War demonstrated Lee's exceptional ability to remain calm under fire and his talent for finding innovative solutions to tactical problems, skills that would later make him legendary. Following the Mexican War, Lee returned to engineering duties and later became superintendent of West Point in 1852. His tenure at the academy was marked by efforts to modernize the curriculum and maintain discipline during increasingly turbulent times. As sectional tensions escalated throughout the 1850s, Lee watched with growing alarm as his beloved Union seemed to fracture along regional lines. In 1859, he was called upon to suppress John Brown's raid at Harper's Ferry, personally leading the assault that captured the radical abolitionist. Though Lee despised slavery and had freed his own inherited slaves, he viewed Brown's actions as dangerous fanaticism that threatened the social order. This incident presaged the greater conflict to come and placed Lee at the center of the nation's mounting crisis over slavery and states' rights. When South Carolina seceded in December 1860, Lee faced the most agonizing decision of his life. He had spent 32 years serving the United States Army, with distinction, and personally opposed secession, believing it to be revolution against the government he had sworn to defend. However, when Virginia voted to leave the Union on April 17, 1861, Lee's loyalty to his native state proved stronger than his allegiance to the federal government. He resigned his commission on April 20th, writing to General Scott that he could not raise my hand against my relatives, my children, my home. 3 days later, Virginia's convention appointed him commander of state forces. Lee's decision to join the Confederacy was not born of enthusiasm for the Southern cause, but from his belief that his primary duty lay with Virginia, regardless of personal cost. Lee's early Confederate service was marked by mixed results that led some to question his abilities. His first field command in Western Virginia ended in failure, earning him the derisive nickname Granny Lee from Confederate newspapers. He was then assigned to strengthen coastal defenses in South Carolina and Georgia, valuable but unglamorous work that kept him from the main theaters of action. Everything changed on June 1, 1862, when General Joseph E. Johnston was wounded at the Battle of Seven Pines. Confederate President Jefferson Davis, despite some reservations, appointed Lee to command what would become known as the Army of Northern Virginia. Lee immediately began planning an aggressive campaign to drive Union forces away from Richmond, transforming the Confederate strategy from passive defense to bold offensive action that would characterize his entire tenure as Army commander. The 7 days battles from June 25th to July 1st, 1862, announced Lee's arrival as a master of battlefield tactics. Facing George McClellan's Peninsula campaign that threatened Richmond, Lee orchestrated a series of attacks that forced the much larger Union Army to retreat, despite suffering heavier casualties. His strategy relied on rapid movement, concentration of force at decisive points, and aggressive action that kept enemy commanders off balance. At the Second Battle of Bull Run in August 1862, Lee achieved perhaps his most brilliant tactical victory, using Stonewall Jackson as bait to lure Union General John Pope into a trap while James Longstreet delivered a crushing flank attack. These victories established Lee's reputation as an aggressive commander willing to take enormous risks to achieve decisive results, even when facing superior numbers and resources. Lee's invasion of Maryland in September 1862 represented both his strategic vision and its ultimate limitations. Recognizing that the Confederacy could not win a war of attrition against the Union's superior resources, Lee sought to shift the conflict to enemy territory, hoping to influence Northern public opinion and possibly gain European recognition for Confederate independence. However, the campaign culminated in the Battle of Antietam on September 17, 1862, the bloodiest single day in American military history. Despite achieving tactical stalemate against McClellan's larger force, Lee's army suffered casualties it could not afford and was forced to retreat back to Virginia. The failed invasion ended Confederate hopes for foreign intervention and gave President Lincoln the political victory he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, fundamentally altering the war's moral dimension. The Battle of Gettysburg from July 1st to 3rd, 1863, marked the turning point of Lee's career and the Confederate cause. His second invasion of the North began promisingly, with his army advancing deep into Pennsylvania while Union forces struggled to respond. However, the accidental collision of Confederate and Union forces near Gettysburg led to a 3-day battle that would determine the war's outcome. On the final day, against the advice of General Longstreet, Lee ordered a massive frontal assault across open ground against entrenched Union positions on Cemetery Ridge. Pickett's charge, as it became known, resulted in catastrophic Confederate casualties and marked the beginning of the end for Southern independence. Lee personally took responsibility for the defeat, telling his retreating soldiers that the failure was his alone, demonstrating the nobility of character that earned him enduring respect, even from his enemies. Following Gettysburg, Lee faced the impossible task of defending Virginia against Union General Ulysses S. Grant's relentless overland campaign beginning in May 1864. The battles of the Wilderness, Spotsylvania Courthouse, and Cold Harbor showcased Lee's defensive genius as he repeatedly bloodied Grant's advancing armies. However, unlike previous Union commanders who had retreated after suffering heavy casualties, Grant continued pressing south toward Richmond, forcing Lee into a war of attrition the Confederacy could not win. Despite tactical victories that inflicted enormous Union casualties, Lee's army grew steadily weaker, while Grant's forces were continuously reinforced. The siege of Petersburg from June 1864 to April 1865 slowly strangled Confederate supply lines and demonstrated that even Lee's tactical brilliance could not overcome the Union's overwhelming material advantages and Grant's grim determination to continue fighting regardless of losses. By early 1865, Lee's situation had become hopeless. His army, reduced to fewer than 30,000 effective soldiers, faced starvation and desertion, while Grant's forces numbered over 100,000 well-supplied troops. On April 2nd, the fall of Petersburg forced Lee to abandon Richmond and attempt a fighting retreat westward, hoping to link up with General Joseph E. Johnston's forces in North Carolina. However, Union cavalry and infantry units cut off his escape routes, surrounding the remnants of the Army of Northern Virginia near Appomattox Courthouse. Recognizing that further resistance would only result in useless bloodshed, Lee made the agonizing decision to surrender. On April 9, 1865, he met Grant in the McLean House parlor, where the two generals conducted themselves with mutual respect and dignity that helped begin the process of national reconciliation. Lee's surrender at Appomattox effectively ended the Civil War, though scattered Confederate forces continued fighting for several more weeks. His decision to surrender, rather than wage guerrilla warfare, probably saved thousands of lives and prevented the conflict from degenerating into a prolonged insurgency that could have torn the nation apart for decades. After the war, Lee faced possible charges of treason, but was protected by the surrender terms Grant had negotiated. He spent his final years as president of Washington College in Lexington, Virginia, working to rebuild education in the South and counseling former Confederates to accept defeat and work towards sectional reconciliation. Lee consistently advised against any attempt to relitigate the war's outcome, believing that the South must accept the verdict of arms and focus on peaceful reconstruction. He died on October 12, 1870, at age 63, his health broken by the war's stresses and the weight of his moral burdens. Robert E. Lee's legacy remains one of the most complex and controversial in American history. His tactical brilliance is undeniable. Military historians consistently rank him among history's greatest battlefield commanders, comparable to Napoleon, Alexander, and Caesar in his ability to achieve victory against superior odds. His gentleman's conduct, personal integrity, and gracious acceptance of defeat earned him respect even from former enemies and helped heal the nation's wounds. However, his decision to fight for a cause that sought to preserve slavery has increasingly overshadowed his military achievements. Modern America struggles to reconcile admiration for his tactical genius with condemnation of the cause he served. Lee's true legacy may lie not in the battles he won or lost, but in his final counsel to his fellow Southerners, that defeat must be accepted with dignity, that the future required reconciliation rather than recrimination, and that a nation's healing depends on the willingness of former enemies to lay down their swords and work together toward a common future.